Welcome to The Explainer. On April 22nd, a beautiful, scenic meadow in Kashmir was turned into a killing field. Today, we're digging deep, going way beyond the headlines, to really understand the anatomy of this attack, from the high-tech planning behind it to the deep-rooted history that fueled the whole thing. So, take a look at this. This is Basaran Valley, a super popular tourist spot in Pahalgam, in Indian-administered Kashmir. People call it mini Switzerland. And this idyllic, peaceful scene, this was the target of a meticulously planned attack. And this is the number of lives that were lost that day. 26 people. 25 of them were tourists, and one was a local pony handler, just trying to make a living. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at how that meadow became a battlefield. Then, we'll get into the anatomy of the plot itself. We'll ask who the attackers were, zoom out to see the decades-long conflict in Kashmir, and finally, cover the fallout and the investigation. All right, let's start at the beginning with the events of April 22nd and how a peaceful meadow was turned into a deadly, inescapable trap. No, this wasn't some random, chaotic shooting. No, this was a chillingly precise strategy. First, the attackers just blended into the crowd, like anyone else. Then, they started firing to create absolute panic. But here's the key. That chaos wasn't the goal. It was a tool to push people, to herd them right toward the exits where, you guessed it, accomplices were waiting to block any chance of escape. According to eyewitnesses, what followed was a terrifying 25-minute ordeal. They say the attackers actually separated men and women and used religious questioning to identify and single out Hindu tourists before executing them at close range. So, the big question is, how on earth did they pull off such a complex attack without anyone knowing? Well, that brings us to the anatomy of the plot itself. Okay, so the group that claimed responsibility for this was the Resistance Front, or TRF, and they are a huge piece of this puzzle. The sources we're looking at allege that its very creation was a strategic move. See, by framing itself as a homegrown Kashmiri group, it could try to fly under the radar, avoiding the international sanctions that were already slapped on its alleged parent organizations. And this is where things get really interesting. This attack shows a massive technological leap. We're talking about a whole new playbook. Forget old-school physical recon. They were using high-res satellite images. Instead of easily traced satellite phones, they had encrypted ultrasets. They didn't even need local guides to navigate the dense forests. They had offline GPS apps. This fundamentally changed the game. And get this, one source details how the demand for high-resolution satellite images of this specific area in Pahalgam from a U.S. company called Maxar actually doubled just weeks before the attack. The allegation is that they accessed it through a Pakistani partner company. This let the planners from miles and miles away analyze everything, the terrain, the entry points, the escape routes, and pick the perfect spot for an ambush. And here's the really crucial part. Their communications were practically invisible. They were using these modified Huawei phones, what they call ultrasets, that connected to a Chinese satellite network. This meant they could bypass Indian surveillance systems completely. It created the secure, private line of communication, allowing for perfect coordination between the handlers abroad and the militants right there on the ground. So, who were the people who actually carried this out? Let's take a look at the individuals and the networks that India's National Investigation Agency, the NIA, alleges were behind all of this. The NIA's investigation really paints a picture of a coordinated effort. The sources describe this kind of hybrid team: a professional soldier for tactical leadership, a radicalized local for on-the-ground knowledge, remote planners coordinating from Pakistan, and a deep support network hiding in plain sight. This photo, this became a key piece of evidence. It was actually found on a killed militant's phone months before this attack. And at the time, the authorities had no idea who the guy on the right was. It was only after the attack, using witness descriptions and interrogations, that the NIA identified him as the alleged ringleader, Hasim Musa. And we mentioned OGWs. These individuals are described as the absolute backbone of militant operations in Kashmir. Think about it. They're the mechanics, the shopkeepers, the farmers who live seemingly normal lives. But they're the ones providing shelter, food, intelligence, everything the militants need to move and operate within communities, which makes them so incredibly difficult to track. But to really, truly get why this happened, we have to zoom out. We have to place this single attack within the context of the nearly 80-year-long conflict over Kashmir. Yeah, this conflict didn't just start yesterday. It was born all the way back in 1947 with the partition of British India, which immediately led to war and a divided territory. For decades, you had these uneasy truces, like the line of control, but that all gave way to a massive insurgency in the 1980s. And the tension just skyrocketed in 2019 when India's government revoked Kashmir's special autonomous status. That really set the stage for a whole new chapter in this conflict. And it's so important to remember, as one of our sources points out, this isn't just some political squabble over lines on a map. At its heart, it's a conflict over land, over identity, and really the unresolved legacy of partition. It's something that has fueled 3 wars and this decades-long insurgency that has shaped millions of lives. Okay, so finally, let's look at the immediate aftermath. What happened right after the attack? From the official investigation to the diplomatic temperature rising between 2 nuclear-armed neighbors. India's NIA didn't waste time. They formally charged Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Resistance Front in this massive, nearly 1,600-page charge sheet. They directly accused Pakistan-based groups of being the masterminds. Now, for its part, Pakistan has consistently denied these accusations. And the attack triggered an immediate diplomatic crisis. I mean, you had India and Pakistan dismantling treaties that had been in place for decades. Treaties on water rights, on bilateral relations. And on the world stage, the tension just kept building. Sources allege that Pakistan and China even worked together to block TRF from being named in a UN Security Council statement that was condemning the attack. So while the investigation is moving forward and all these charges are being filed, the sources we've seen report that the main attackers, Haitham Musa, Ali Bai, and Adil Toker, are still out there, at large. There's a massive search operation going on for them right now in the dense forests of the region. You know, the Pahalgam attack was more than just another tragedy. In a way, it was a demonstration of a new kind of warfare. The use of satellite recon, of untraceable communications, it all bypassed traditional security. And that leaves us with a really critical question. With technology and tactics evolving so much faster than diplomacy, what does the future of this decades-old conflict in Kashmir even look like?